bottom line.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Powell, and I'll be hosting today's podcast episode. Now, our last episode focused on the adoption of instant payments outside of the US. But in today's episode, we're crossing the Atlantic to speak with payments industry expert Jessica Cheney on the state of play for instant payments in the United States. Jessica is Vice President and Head of Product Management for Digital Banking Solutions at Bottomline and has over 25 years of cash management experience with banks and software providers, including senior leadership roles at US Bank. Jessica has served on the US Federal Reserve's Faster Payments Task Force, NACHA Innovation Alliance, and the US Faster Payments Council. Now, Jessica, the last time we chatted was in 2022, actually. So we're delighted to welcome you back to the Payments Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm really happy to be back talking to you about one of my favorite things. I can't believe it's been 2 years.
It goes quickly, doesn't it?
But I'll take any excuse to talk about payments.
So, Jessica, globally, there is a lot of effort that's been put into achieving payment interoperability, overcoming fragmentation and friction, and enabling seamless cross-border transactions. We also have migration deadlines for adopting the ISO 20022 file format, which have been legislated and several deadlines set. From a US perspective, how is the country faring on this front?
Well, Jackie, most of our banks have been pretty much head down, focused on the approaching ISO 20022 deadlines for both FedWire and SWIFT. However, many have taken this as an opportunity to modernize their payments infrastructure with either the addition of a multi-payment type gateway or payment hub, or the upgrades of their wire systems, or both. While the deadlines have forced this type of attention, and they are laying the foundation for the interoperable use of ISO 20022 format going forward, many of our banks, however, one, quietly stating they might not be ready for the next March deadline, or two, saying that it really has added a bit of a distraction for many banks from introducing real-time or instant payments on either the clearinghouse or FedNow. Now, I think this delay is only temporary, and the move to a more common standard globally, not only in the US, will actually eventually result in all of our interoperability goals being met, but it has only taken us 20 years to get here.
Yeah, only 20 years. So some countries like Brazil and India, China, and the EU are making great progress on the adoption of instant payments. Are we seeing the same sort of uptick in the US? And if not, what's behind that?
Well, like I just mentioned, that the impending FedWire and SWIFT ISO compliance deadlines have distracted some banks in their instant payments journey. The clearinghouse continues to report quarter-over-quarter growth in its real-time payments network. They just reported ending Q1 at 76 million transactions and over 42 billion in value originated. That's a 3% volume and an 8% value increase only over Q4. NACHA is also reporting continued increases in the use of same-day ACH. This is our equivalent of the UK faster payment. There were 273 million same-day ACH payments in the first quarter. The value of those payments was over 719 billion. That's almost a 27% increase from the same time last year. So the same-day ACH volume in March of 24 was 95.6 million, averaging more than 4.5 million payments per day. Both of these are our monthly highs since same-day ACH was launched in 2016. And FedNow has been reporting at the end of 23, they signed over 300 financial institutions to their service. So when you put all of these things together, you can really see that the movement towards real-time / instant payments in the US has really started to take off.
So thank you, Jess. That's clearly, numbers are clearly on the rise there. One thing, the Clearinghouse's real-time payments initiative was introduced 5 years ago, and FedNow's instant payments was launched last year. Between both clearing systems, there are a few hundred banks and credit unions signed up to offer instant payments. But can you help us understand what's the difference between the two systems?
Sure. The two clearing systems are very similar, which is a blessing. The biggest difference is probably the most obvious. They have two different operators at the moment, and at the moment, they do not interoperate together. The clearinghouse is owned by a consortium of banks, but the RTP network is open for anyone to join. FedNow is operated by the Federal Reserve Bank in the US. While this might seem odd to have two operators of what ends up being the same service, it is a well-established and competitive situation in the US. Both of these entities today operate US ACH and wire clearing systems, and between the two of them, they have over time obtained interoperability. The real-time or instant payment clearing systems are not yet interoperable, but both are based off of the ISO 2002 message set. And luckily for technology solution providers like us, FedNow has adopted a very similar usage of the message set as the clearinghouse did when they launched RTP. So each system has its own operating rules, guidelines, limits, and of course, very different settlement account requirements.
One recent industry report states that by 2027, instant payments will make up almost a third, so more specifically, that's 27.8% of all electronic payments globally. Now, that's only 36 months away. Another report states that 9 in 10 US financial institutions will plan to adopt one or both rails in less than 2 years. So I guess I have a few questions around this. Is this timing practical? And is the Clearinghouse and FedNow, are they working together to create mechanisms for interoperability? And what considerations should banks take if they wish to pursue or use both of these clearing systems?
I think the broader global prediction is likely to occur, especially if we continue to count the UK faster payments and US same-day ACH in that category. The second prediction of 9 in 10 US financial institutions adopting one or both rails in less than 2 years, I think is a bit aggressive given the current situation with FedWire and SWIFT ISO compliance deadlines in 2025. I don't think they're terribly far off, but that having to deal with the SWIFT and FedWire cutovers is first and foremost in most of these banks' minds. However, I think there's also a fundamental shift that needs to change regardless. As the clearinghouse has been in production for over 5 years now, they're starting to see real traffic on the network. The FedNow program, while having signed 300 participants, is at the end of 23, has the same initial structural problem that the clearinghouse RTP did at its launch. Everyone wants to sign up to receive instant payments, while very few banks initially register to send instant payments. You can't grow a network effectively if it remains that lopsided. So right now, FedNow is hyper-focused on solving that particular issue and ironing out all of the operational kinks after its launch. Given how much industry pressure there is on interoperability, I know that it's on the roadmap for both the Fed and TCH. However, it's just a matter of priority. In the meantime, banks can choose to join both clearing systems. They just need to have a technology gateway provider that is certified for both. Of the gateway providers that we've spoken to, they all intend to provide a set of rules so that they know how to process payments according to their bank customer preferences. For a while, we probably will not see a large overlap where banks can accept to send or receive payments in either system, but the gateway providers are prepared to send traffic to either. banks will now need to work with their gateway providers to implement the processing criteria rules, meaning if a payment can be sent through either FedNow or RTP, which is the route that the bank will choose to clear against. However, once interoperability is established, I think it will be a lot easier, and we will see less banks joining both. The reason that a bank will join both right now is because that's the only way to get the most reach.
Got you. Thank you. So my next two questions are about the adoption of real-time or instant payments, one on the bank side and the other on the corporate side. Firstly, I chatted with Leo of Lippis Advisors recently, and he mentioned a 90% adoption rate by small US banks as the inflection point at which instant payments gains critical mass in the US. What's your take on its acceptance as a de facto payment type going forward?
Yeah, I think the 90% adoption rate is probably a little high for where I would say the inflection point is. I think if we have 60% of the largest banks in the US that are truly sending and receiving, we will have reached that inflection point. Your question went a little further, Jackie, than that. And the way I think about this is eventually, and I haven't been able to actually put a time frame for when eventually is, but real-time payments are very likely to replace wires and what we refer to as single entry ACH transactions. But there are a lot of corporate systems that are in place today that will need to change for real-time payments to fully replace a multi-recipient ACH batch. And unfortunately, those changes will take some time for corporates to do. And frankly, the corporate will need to have a compelling business case to make those changes on their end, because there's cost associated with making those changes as well.
While consumers benefit the most from instant payments today, what about corporates? So Ifran Ahmed, Managing Director and Head of US Payments in Global Payment Solutions at Bank of America, has said that real-time payments have spurred financial institutions to modernize their operations to keep up with where their customers and their customers' customers have already gotten to. Worldwide, there are benefits to integrating payments into existing business applications and workflow, making it easier for finance teams to make precision payments whenever they need to, boosting both revenue opportunities and customer experience. So in your opinion, what's needed to drive that corporate demand? Is it more or better use cases? Is it greater education, perhaps?
I think it's a little bit of both, but the first word that comes to my mind in answering your question is awareness. An awareness around how to use consumer demand to create a competitive advantage use case. An example I'll give you that has arisen out of a demand or an awareness of consumers for real instant payments that kind of coupled with the need to come up with a competitive advantage. Many of our fast food restaurants in the US have moved to supporting and advertising that they use instant or on-demand payroll. And they're using this real-time payments use case as a competitive advantage in hiring for their workforce here in the US. So I think that anytime that those, you can get compelling consumer demand coupled with a very advantageous or competitively advantageous use case, that's really where we're going to see a lot of immediate success in corporate adoption. There is also a use or a message in this whole instant payments realm in the US that I don't think has really taken off yet, but I think has the ability to potentially really be that springboard. And I'm referring to request for payment. Request for payment in the US implementation is really a very simple invoicing tool that a lot of small businesses could take advantage of. And it really is not only an invoicing tool, but because it has the ability to be responded to in real time, can be a real cash management tool for some of these small businesses as well. This is really where the convergence of consumer and business can kind of come together. Consumers are very used to responding to a request for payment for, their friends that they've gone out to a meal with. Venmo does this very well. I'm going to send you a request for the $25 for the pizza that we just shared. And so it's a paradigm that consumers are used to utilizing. So small businesses really get into the habit of using a request for payment. I think, again, you're kind of marrying a real-time payment tool on the part of the small business, and then the demand or the accepted practice on the consumer side. So the more things that we can find like that, the more likely we are to see corporate adoption of instant payments.
It leads me nicely onto my last question, in fact. What's your take on the foster payments, foster fraud phrase, which I hear people bandying about?
Jackie, that phrase makes, the hair in the back of my neck go up, pushes my buttons, because there's absolutely no reason that it has to be true. The time constraints that we put on instant payments are really between the time it leaves the bank, from the sender's bank, to the time it has to be received and paid into the receiver's account. That absolutely provides enough time for all of the best practice fraud monitoring and fraud deterrence to be applied to all forms of instant payments prior to them being sent into the clearing system. So there is absolutely no excuse or requirement for us to take shortcuts on this.
I love that. No excuse or requirement to take shortcuts. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's all that's left for me to do, is to thank you for talking to us today and for bringing our listeners up to speed on instant payments in the US. And to our followers, thank you for listening in. You can catch our next episodes on SoundCloud, Spotify, or Apple. Catch you next time.